Somewhere in a forest right now, there is a specific crow, not a crow, that crow. It has a personality. It is bolder than its neighbors or shyer. It has favorites and grudges, habits all its own, a way of moving through the world that belongs to it and nothing else. To us, it is one black bird among millions of identical black birds. But here is the unsettling question. Does it know that it is someone? Not just alive, not just aware of the world, but aware that out of every creature in existence, it is one particular self, distinct from all the rest. Does an animal ever feel the simple, staggering fact of being me? This is one of the deepest questions we can ask about another mind, and it hides a trap right at the start, because there are actually two questions here tangled together, and pulling them apart is the whole key to answering either one. The first question is, are animals individuals? The second is, do they know it? They sound almost like the same question. They are not. And those two turn out to have completely different answers. Let's start with the first one because the answer is clearer than you might expect. Animals are unmistakably individuals, and not in a vague, sentimental, every creature is special way, in a hard, measurable, scientific one. For a long time, biologists actively avoided talking about animal personality. It sounded unserious, unscientific, like projecting human traits onto creatures that were really just running instincts. No more individual than one raindrop is from the next. A scientist who talked about a fish's personality risked not being taken seriously. But over the past few decades, that whole view has collapsed under the sheer weight of evidence. Researchers started testing animals the way psychologists test people, measuring traits like boldness, curiosity, aggression, and sociability, across time and across situations. And what they found was striking and impossible to explain away. Individual animals are consistent. A bold fish tends to stay bold across different situations, across different challenges, across its whole life. A shy one stays shy. Test the same octopus twice, weeks apart, and you get the same temperament both times. Some great tits, a common little songbird, are consistently fast, aggressive, risk-taking explorers, while others are consistently slow and cautious, and those differences hold rock steady for a lifetime. This isn't mood, it is character. And this shows up everywhere, in species after species, the moment you look closely enough. In a group of the same animals, the same species, raised in the same place under the same conditions. You'll reliably find bold ones and timid ones, sociable ones and loners, the endlessly curious and the deeply cautious. Their personalities are as distinct from one another as the personalities of the people in any room you've ever walked into. The cow standing in the field, the pigeon on the street corner, the fish drifting in the tank, none of them are interchangeable copies stamped from one mold. Each is a specific particular individual, genuinely different from every other member of its kind. And here is the crucial part. They recognize this about each other. Many animals don't treat their companions as generic, swappable members of the species. They treat them as specific individuals with histories. They know this particular one is my rival. That particular one is my ally. This one I can trust. That one I'd better avoid. Sheep can remember dozens of individual faces, both sheep and human for years at a time. A mother animal can pick her own offspring out of a crowd. A dog knows the difference between its owner and a stranger not as two categories but as two specific, irreplaceable individuals. So on the level of behavior, the verdict is already in. Animals are unmistakably individuals, and they clearly perceive the individuality of others around them. But here is where it gets complicated, because perceiving that others are distinct is not the same thing, not even close to the same thing, as knowing that you yourself are. This is the point where most people reach for the mirror test, the famous experiment where an animal is marked with a spot of dye and shown its reflection, to see whether it realizes the animal in the mirror is itself. A handful of species pass it: great apes, dolphins, elephants, magpies. And it is genuinely fascinating that any do. But we have to be careful here, because the mirror test only asks a very narrow question. Can you recognize your own body in a reflection? That is a real form of self-awareness, but it may be a surprisingly shallow one. It is about the body, the physical outline of you. The far deeper question: do you feel yourself to be a distinct someone, a continuous self moving through time, a particular point of view on the world, is something no mirror can ever measure. An animal could fail the mirror test entirely and still, conceivably, have a rich inner sense of itself, or pass it and have almost none. And that deeper question is much, much harder to reach. Think about what it would actually mean for an animal to recognize itself as an individual in the fullest sense. It would mean having some genuine sense of me, of being separate from the world and separate from every other creature in it. It would mean, on some level, carrying a feeling of this life is mine, this experience belongs to a particular someone. And that someone is here right now and was also here yesterday, and will be here tomorrow. That is not about passing a clever test in a lab. It is about whether there is an inner someone in there for whom the test, and the life, even matters. And this is where science slams into a wall. Because everything we can actually measure is once again behavior and structure. The outside of the animal, never the inside. We can chart an animal's personality with real precision. We can prove that it recognizes others as individuals. We can watch it pass or fail a mirror test. What we cannot do, by any method we currently have, is climb inside its head and find out whether there is a felt sense of self in there at all. Whether that bold fish actually experiences itself as a specific someone who is being bold, or whether the boldness simply happens, reliably and consistently, with no inner self anywhere claiming it as its own. Because it is entirely possible, this is the strange part, to be a completely distinct individual and not know it. Think of a river. Every river on Earth is unlike every other, with its own particular shape, its own bends and depths and flow. Each one is unrepeatable, and each one knows absolutely nothing at all. An animal could, in exactly the same way, have a wholly unique personality stable, measurable, genuinely one of a kind, and still have no inner sense whatsoever of being a self. The individuality would be completely real. The self-awareness would be entirely absent. And from the outside, watching only the behavior, we might never be able to tell those two situations apart. And yet, you probably knew this was coming. There is that pattern again, the one that keeps surfacing every time we look. The animals that show the richest signs of selfhood, that pass the mirror test, that seem to plan for their own futures and grieve their own pasts, are the very same ones with the most complex minds in every other respect. Apes, elephants, dolphins, some of the birds. It is not scattered randomly across the tree of life. Whatever sense of self exists out there in the animal world, it seems to deepen exactly as minds grow richer and more complex, which is precisely what you'd expect if the feeling of being someone isn't a single switch that is either on or off, but something that grows, by slow degrees, as a mind becomes more capable of holding itself in view. So maybe selfhood, like so much else in the animal world, runs along a spectrum. At one end, an insect, a genuine individual, with its own subtle differences from its neighbors, but almost certainly no inner someone home to know it. In the middle, our crow, clever, distinct, recognizing others as individuals, remembering faces and grudges, perhaps carrying some dim, flickering sense of its own separateness from the world. And near the far end, an elephant standing silent at the bones of its own mother, or an ape gazing at itself in the still surface of a pool, brushing up against something that starts to look a great deal like a self, reflecting on itself. We spent a very long time assuming that this, the sense of being a distinct someone, the private feeling of me, was ours and ours alone, the one thing that set us cleanly apart from every other creature on the planet. But the more carefully and honestly we look, the more that easy certainty dissolves, not into a clean, comforting answer, but into a spectrum we are only just beginning to map, with far, far more of the animal world already standing on it than we ever expected to find. So think again about that crow out in the forest. It is beyond any doubt at all, an individual as specific, as particular, as unrepeatable as you are. Whether it knows that whether there is a someone in there quietly aware of being itself, we may never be able to prove one way or the other. But the next time you see one, remember this: you're not looking at a crow. You're looking at that crow, the only one exactly like it that has ever existed in all of time or ever will. And somewhere behind those dark, watchful eyes, there may be far more of a someone looking back at you than we have ever quite allowed ourselves to believe.